If you've been observing the right's response to the disappointing Republican showing on the 2022 midterm elections, you may have run across some of these arguments.
Also, single women are breaking for Democrats by 30 points. And this makes sense when you think about how Democrat policies are designed to keep women single. But once women get married, they vote Republican. Married women, married men go for Republicans by double digits. But single women and voters under 40 have been captured by Democrats. So we need these ladies to get married. And it's time to fall in love and just settle down. Guys, go put a ring on it.
Now, the reason that I abhor women's suffrage is not that it was something women just demanded that they don't deserve or that they're not capable of executing. Actually, it was a manifestation of cowardice from the men, because it was a way of saying, you're on your own, handle yourself, I'm not responsible for your decision-making, and therefore I can't be held accountable for what happens afterwards.
Marriage was always a social institution. Everybody understands this. This has been true throughout human history. Only now have we redefined marriage into sort of a private arrangement between you and the other person and treated it as though you and the other person had sort of like a consensual business arrangement that is not even subject to court oversight. We treat marriage now with the casualness of you and a friend getting together for lunch. And that is not what marriage traditionally was.
Now, a lot of what I just showed you actually stems from a CNN exit poll which showed that by very large margins, 68% of unmarried women actually broke for the Democratic Party in the 2022 midterm elections, leading a cacophony of right-wing voices to immediately condemn the condition of being an unmarried woman and to predict doom if the rate of unmarried women continued to go up. I'll read some of the sentiments right here. Inez Stepman, a conservative writer over at The Federalist, said the following: "We have to reckon with this as a political force. On the right, we love to mock and complain about this, but millennials will have the highest proportion of unmarried and childless women, hitting 40, probably in all of human history." Here's the catch. "And they will vote to ruin your life." C.J. Pearson, someone who we've talked about a lot on this program, has said the following: "I hope the unmarried women that voted en masse for the left realize that you having the right to kill your unborn babies won't do you much good when you can't afford to buy groceries or put gas up your Prius." Jack Posobiec said the regime wants to turn everyone into unmarried women. Joel Berry had perhaps the most viral tweet of this sort of line of attack, saying the following: "Unmarried women in America are lost, miserable, addicted to SSRIs and alcohol, racked with guilt from abortion, and wandering from partner to partner. They are the Democrats' core base now, and the Democrats will do everything possible to manufacture more of them." This tweet got over 20,000 likes. What in the world is going on, ladies and gentlemen? As someone who defines himself as a constitutional conservative, many of my political sensibilities are obviously on the right. Not just politically, but culturally as well, because I understand to preserve the Constitution also means cultivating a culture of virtuous folks who recognize the merits of the American political experiment and the underlying political systems that those merits necessitate. Having said that, this is not the line of attack that is necessary to diagnose the GOP's defeat during the 2022 midterm elections for a few reasons. Practically, and this is going to be a point that has been talked about a lot, but it's a very point. Common sense sometimes is not so common amongst political analysts. Practically, demonizing and villainizing an entire group of people that you actually want to reach is not going to get them into your camp. In fact, it's going to push them away. And I understand that a lot of people are angry, but anger in the heat of passion is actually an enemy of reason. The heat of passion takes your mind away from rational considerations and immediately takes it into a territory where reason cannot go, and that is the depths of your emotions. When you are passionate about something, you may not even think or ask yourself, is this particularly wise for me to believe? You will simply believe it. An overly emotional man or woman is a very dangerous thing to any civilized society, because emotion by itself is not something that can be reasoned with. Now, having said that, there is also a more practical concern, even more practical concern, that this narrative runs into, and that is the percentage difference between unmarried women who actually support Republicans and who don't support Republicans. So that same exit poll that said 68% of unmarried women support Democrats also said 31% of unmarried women support Republicans. Now, we saw the clip from Ally Beth Stuckey, who said that the reason why married women support Republicans more, and of course, according to this poll, about 56% of married women support Republicans, is because married women happen to be more conservative. Now, whether that is true or not is not necessarily tangible to this argument. But what is especially true is that if unmarried women are more likely to be leftist, why do 31% of them break for Republicans? If married women are more likely to be conservative, then why do 42% of them break for Democrats? Here's my point, my friends. Correlation does not equal causation. Just because there is a factor that seems to correlate with a certain effect or a certain thing does not mean that factor is responsible. It would be like saying, for example, all left-handed women enjoy ice cream, or 50% of left-handed women enjoy ice cream. Therefore, something about being left-handed makes you enjoy ice cream. That's obviously an illogical argument. That is not even a factor. There could be 10,000 other things at play in here that would make them vote for the Democrats. The simple fact is this, my friends. If being single inherently gave you a political ideology, a single political ideology, you wouldn't see 31% of single women, unmarried women rather, breaking for Republicans. If being single gave you or being married gave you a particular political ideology, you wouldn't see 42% of married women breaking for the Democrats, or 45% of married men breaking for the Democrats. Perhaps political motivations are more complex than any kind of label someone can hold, whether it be race, whether it be marriage, whether it be age, whether it be height. Perhaps there's something more that goes into compelling man to have a particular political impulse than these characteristics that society says are more important. There is no difference between a leftist saying someone being black determines their political identity than a right-wing person saying someone being married determines their personal identity. There is very little difference other than that race is immutable, marriage is not, but both of them are labels used to classify and reduce human beings to particular ideas that may not line up with how they actually believe and act. We should always look at the individual to see how they act and how they believe, as opposed to interpreting them through the lens of whatever role you think they're supposed to play. But also, there's something even more pernicious going on here, and that is how the right is arriving at these conclusions. And they're doing so by reasoning by means of averages. So if you say the average amount of X person here does Y thing, what you're really saying is that there is some kind of, again, correlation between what that person does and what effect that produces, and the average amount of that kind of person will likely do that kind of thing. Now, averages are just beginning points. They are what we call in data heuristics. They are helpful tools that help us understand what's going on, but they're only a starting point. If you start and begin with a heuristic, you will never understand what's really going on in any given situation. And this is the problem. You cannot add moral or political significance to averages, since they are merely concoctions of numbers. Averages are simply the result of a bunch of numbers and on the distribution chart where those numbers happen to be more in the middle. That's all they are. But what's happening here when you say unmarried women vote for Democrats, therefore there's something wrong with them, is you're using averages to make a moral conclusion, and averages are not made for moral conclusions. They are instead made to help you get deeper inquiry. But there's an even more important point to make here, my friends. You see, there's several different things. There are statistical fallacies going on here. There's emotional arguments overriding the ability to reason their way through this problem. But there's something even bigger going on here, my friends. And that is the conversation about marriage. Now, you saw the clip from Ben Shapiro that I played. where he basically, in response to all of this, said that the problem is this atomized individualism brought forth by a private understanding of marriage is really posing a threat to society. And of course, there are people who automatically assume that if someone is married, they'll be more conservative. But again, as I mentioned, this is not necessarily the case. But what is quite important is this, my friends, is that marriage is oftentimes seen by a lot of more traditionally minded people as this elixir which produces a wonderful life and all the correct opinions. That obviously is not true. Marriage, my friends, is a contractual arrangement that has significant social ramifications. Shapiro said that marriage is not a contractual arrangement solely. It is a social institution that is decided or is informed by how other people see you. But if this really is the case in principle, that means marriage can mean anything and everything to anyone depending on the cultural context within it. But if marriage, taken literally, is a contractual arrangement in the monogamous sense between two people, then that makes it specifically between those two people in a private sense. But the social impacts of marriage cannot be understated, because the social impacts of marriage is that it allows private man in his private capacity, to understand how to interact with society. It basically allows private man to interact with his social element without sacrificing either. Being married in a monogamous context is a good way to teach someone how important moral obligation is, how important commitment is, because those same things translate into society. Having said that, someone can still learn the rules of the road. They can still understand and appreciate society on a fundamental level without ever being in the marriage context, but the marriage context is a more tangible and personal example of how man can learn how to be a moral person. But the problem is, too many on the right are concerned with content and not structure. We're concerned with the fact that there may be some unmarried women who don't get married, and therefore, because they're not married, they somehow have something wrong with them. That's not necessarily the case again, because this is a worry about content, i.e. what is actually going on in their lives, as opposed to structure, i.e. do they live their lives in a manner that is commendable to right reason. And that is the real question here that is not being focused on. The simple fact is this, my friends. The midterms were not lost by people who haven't tied the knot, but rather the midterms were lost for the GOP for a variety of reasons. The McConnell-McCarthy propaganda machine, which disenfranchised many different MAGA candidates from the dollars of the GOP, because McConnell obviously didn't like those people because he viewed them as a threat to his leadership. Also, the fact, and this is the most important thing that no one talks about, and it really grates my gears, the fact that in America, we have a philosophically ignorant populace. We have a majority of Gen Z falling prey to indoctrination techniques by sophisticated political actors who do not actually consider the first principles of the American foundation and then act in accordance to those first principles. But it's not only Gen Z, it's any other demographic that is willing to elect politicians who do not serve at the interest, the fundamental interest of the American experiment. This does not mean you have to be a Republican to do so. You can be an independent and do so, a libertarian and do so. But if you do not affirm the objective truth of the American experiment's principles, and you do not actively act to preserve them, you are not someone who has any business being in office. Essentially, if you're not classically liberal, you have no business holding office in the United States of America. There are so many different reasons this broke. The mail-in ballot situation, which we see, even as the posting of this video, Maricopa County in Arizona is still counting their ballots. And election day has turned into election week. There are a variety of different factors that could have impacted and did impact the results of the 2022 midterm elections. And instead of embracing the inherent complexity of any given situation, it is popular because it is comfortable for human beings to take the simplest answer and provide the simplest justification for it. I've always said the most complex answer said simply is better than the most simplest answer said simply. Meaning, if we can understand the various different facets that come together to make a certain situation, we can actually better appreciate it than defaulting back on something that confirms our biases. This attack against married women is largely just confirmation bias. Look, the data is out there. Marriage certainly contributes to human happiness. It also contributes to human flourishing, with all things being considered. Now, there are many cases where it doesn't. If it ends in divorce or whatever, there's many cases where it doesn't. But generally, according to the data, people who within 2 years of marriage report having higher happiness levels than before they were married. Does that mean that marriage is the only key to happiness? Of course not. But it does mean that there is something about the structure of marriage that makes people happy. Having said that, if being unmarried is the key to destroying civilization, then how come there are people who are unmarried who happen to vote in various different ways and who necessarily have different kinds of conduct than other folks who are unmarried? Once again, these simplified attacks on groups of people, on categories of people, do nothing more than create boogeymen in the political environment that satisfy us because they approach something close to an answer for all the problems we have, when in all reality, the work of investigating and understanding things are much harder, and they don't give as much gratification as pinning things on someone does. Have whatever thoughts you want to have about marriage, but what you cannot do is, while trying to create political strategy or any kind of strategy, go down the path of erroneous thinking. It is erroneous to pin all of civilization's woes on one group of people. It is erroneous to think of people as groups as opposed to fully realized human individuals that exist in a social context. It is erroneous to try to ascribe certain qualities or characteristics to certain groups of people because you happen not to agree with their lifestyle choices. This is what we call bigotry. It is erroneous to reason by means of averages, meaning using statistics to draw moral inferences. You can't do that because statistics are not based on numbers or aggregates. It's based on first principles and moral rules. It is erroneous to do all of these different things, and yet so many who happen to be conservative or profess that are doing so. I want the right to succeed and prevail in the culture and in the political sphere. I want the first principles of America to be cemented back into our discourse and to be the guiding light of all of our policy decisions. I want these things more than anything else in the world. But I won't get them, you won't get them, no one will get them at the expense of vilifying people on the basis of something that we may not like, but it would pay for us to understand and deal with in a complex way, in a way that respects nuance, that respects depth, and gives way to a more deeper intellectual appreciation, as opposed to in a way that respects none of these things and simply affirms our own individual prejudices. My friends, reason not in error, reason in good faith, reason rigorously, and regardless of whatever answer you've got, you can be sure that you've got it. Not because you allowed your emotions to take the best of you, but because you've seen the light of truth and you're following it where it may take you. Follow the light of truth where it may take you, my friends. All right, my friends, love you guys so much. If you love me, please be sure to support this channel. Be sure to share this video, comment on this video. Be sure to buy some of the merch that we have over at christianjwatson.com. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to do all that kind of stuff. My friends, love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye.